We're going to start to finish up our wolf. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to darken the nose again with a 229 black. I'm going over it to make it even darker than we made it before. Making sure to darken those little whisker holes. Being careful to shape the mouth exactly as I see it in the reference photo. I'm going to add a brown we talked about in our other videos. This is 353 cordovan. And adding the whisker holes on the bottom part of the mouth as well. I'm using my white General Pastel pencil to add the tooth. Sometimes things get covered up by pastel, so I want to add that tooth and get it in there. And I'm also going to add a highlight on the nose, and for that I'm going to use the Carbothello 440 Sky Blue, or you could use the Caran d'Ache 161 Light Blue. I wanted to give you a choice of pencils in this project. And now I'm using the white to go over the blue, and it makes it a brighter light blue. So we modified it using the white pastel pencil. Use blue on the edge of the nostril and also on the nose leather. So I'm going around the outside edge. Now that we have the moon in, we can reinforce some of these areas we put in before that is backlit on the wolf. And there's a little highlight on the nose. So I'm being careful to add these areas. Now I'm adding the whiskers with my pastel pencil. And make sure your pencil is sharp. And I also hold my pencil at an angle to my paper rather than straight up and down, and this enables me to pull out the whiskers a little better. Now because this is a small area, I'm going to use my pencil to add the little hairs that are between the whisker holes. So this is very effective. Be sure and add your whiskers in the direction that the hair grows. These are very tiny and they grow out from that area of the whisker holes down to the mouth area. And once I have those in, I can add a couple of whiskers and pull those out as well. Now we're going to use the Conte stick, the 2B white Conte stick, pastel stick. This is harder than the new pastel white, and it enables you to add little white hairs so much easier than using the white new pastel. And because we used mostly hard pastels for putting down our underlayers, it gives us a good surface to add these little hairs on top of. So I'm using short strokes, going in the direction that the fur grows on the muzzle, carefully adding my little hairs. Take your time when you do this. When your edge gets dull, rotate your stick. The Conte sticks are shorter and a little bit smaller than new pastel sticks, so I'm using a holder to hold my stick because it's easier for me to draw with it. You can get holders online, and be sure you buy more than one stick when you buy them. They come in packages of 2. I would suggest getting more than 2 just to have them on hand. I'm going to leave this in real time so you can see how slowly I add these little hairs. I also have a piece of glassine down to protect my painting and to keep my hand from smearing the pastel that we applied previously. I'm curving my strokes carefully around the muzzle of the wolf. Now moving to the outer edge and pulling out the little fine hairs that are on his forehead. And now I'm switching to my 276 Buff New Pastel. I'm using it to add the little bright yellow hairs under the eye where it catches the moonlight. You could use the Conte 47 Naples Yellow if you're more comfortable with that, or the Caran d'Ache 011 Pale Yellow if you'd rather use a pencil. So here I have the Conte 47 in my hand to show you that I can add the little hairs with that as well. They're not quite as bright with the Conte as they are with the 276 or with the Caran d'Ache pencil. But I want you to be able to use whatever materials you have on hand. Now to separate some of the hairs, I'm using my 6B charcoal pencil to draw short little lines out from the eye to kind of separate those hairs so they're not too solid a mass. Adding the little gray hairs as opposed to white on the face, I'm using a Conte number 20 pencil. You can also use a Carbothello 720 or a 700. And again, the black 6B charcoal pencil to add little black hairs in between the white. And now I'm back to my Conte 2B white pastel stick. Now I'm using my 276 buff to put on that outer edge because it's a brighter yellow color. And again, you can use this, or you can use the Caran d'Ache 11 pale yellow, which we'll be using a lot of as we move further on because it's a brighter yellow. And you could also use your Conte, but it's not going to be as bright. And we want this to be brightly backlit. We want some drama with our color, which is why I chose these colors. Now here I am using the Caran d'Ache 011 pale yellow pencil. This is fabulous pencil. Caran d'Ache pencils are very soft, and because they are soft, you can lay the color down right on your pastel painting and they work beautifully. Harder pencils, not so much. So I put that bright yellow, and now I'm using my 353 New Pastel to pull some little dark brown hairs into that edge of the backlit hairs. That just is very, very dramatic. So I'm going to use it as well to put some color over the top of the eye. I'm pulling little whiskers up into the moon area, going over the tip of the nose and adding that bright color. I would highly recommend these. I'm continuing to work on the face. I'm going to use the black 6B charcoal pencil to darken that edge that goes up into the backlit area. decided that needs to be a little bit darker, so I'm using my black new pastel. I'm using it on the back end, but I'm just adding a few strokes, and not all over, just in spaces, certain places like the mask and the edge of the ear. Now I'm adding a little blue, 305 spruce blue to that area. The value is just not quite dark enough, which is why I'm adding the color. So I keep adjusting the value as I paint. If yours is dark enough, don't add more color. Mine was not. I work up gradually, so sometimes I need to add more color as I move along. Adding a little blue at the top of the head as well. And now I'm using my Conte pastel stick to add hairs to this area. And you can see that I'm adding these hairs individually, short little hairs. I'm switching to my gray pencil to show you that you can also add hairs with the gray Carbothello pencil. This is number 720. And adding back in a few black hairs. Now we're going to work on the ear a little bit. So I'm using my Conte stick to add some white hair in the ear. Be very careful of the direction of the hair when you're doing the ear. It kind of grows out from the center in all directions. And the hairs here are a little longer than they were on the forehead. Now I've switched to my 276 buff, using a sharp edge for that. And if I push hard, I can get a very fluffy effect by adding this color because it's softer than the others. And so it makes for a really nice ear hair, so to speak. You can see how pretty that is. Now this is my white pastel pencil. I'm adding a few hairs into that area with that. And this is the Caran d'Ache pale yellow, which works very well there too. So you could use that to substitute for the 276. I'm using the sharp edge of the 233 raw sienna to add little gold hairs, little tiny hairs at the base of the ear. They don't really look yellow. They do have a golden tone and they blend really well and add a nice color note in this area. They're very short, so be sure and keep them short and watch your direction. Putting them on this outside edge of the ear, there are 2 or 3 layers of hair in this area, and this works beautifully to define those. I'm adding a little bit of 229 black back in to separate the hairs a little bit and continuing to work on them with the 211, excuse me, the 233. I'm using the 720 Carbothello gray pencil to add the light hairs in the ear. I don't want to use white here because they're not really white. They're in the shadow area of the wolf, so we're going to use gray instead. So I'm using that 720 Conte pencil, which works really well. I'm using my white charcoal pencil or white pastel pencil to add a few brighter hairs in the ear and to pull out a few in the background. I'm really very pleased with the way the ear is looking. I'm pulling a few tiny hairs out and adding some more hairs with the white pastel or charcoal pencil into that ear area. And as we're pulling the pencil over the darker areas, it colors it. I mean, it adds some color to it so it's not super bright white. I'm using the Conte stick to add even brighter ones because it's the softest tool we have. So if we use it, the pencils are soft, but they're not as soft as this stick. And so this adds the brighter note. So you want to save your softest pastels or pencils for last when you're painting. I'm using the Caran d'Ache on the outside edge to add that bright yellow backlit area. I'm adding a little brown with my 353 cordovan to the tip of the ear And now I needed to darken it up a bit, and now I can use the 720 Carbothello to add a few little hairs in that area. I'm finishing up the ear now and using the Conte to add some bright hairs. So you can see that I take my time to do this. It's well worth it to take your time and go slowly and build these areas up. Now we're going to work on the other side of the wolf's face. I'm working on the chin with the 700 Carbothello light gray pencil. I got a little too much on there, so I used my charcoal pencil to knock off the extra pastel pencil that I didn't want there. This is a light gray pencil as well. It's a little brighter than the 720. So I'm just adding short little hairs in the direction that they grow. This is more in a shadow area. Now as I work out to the outer edge, I'm using the Conte pastel stick. Hairs are getting a little bit longer. I'm just making sure my strokes are going in the direction that the hair grows. Now I'm using the tip of my black new pastel to kind of blend those white hairs in. It looked a little choppy to me, so I just used my black pastel to fix that. And I'll continue adding hairs to the face. Now as we go down the face, the hairs are also going to get longer. So you can see that my strokes are a little bit longer. And I'm also not filling in every single inch of my underpainting. I'm letting my underpainting show through and glow through the strokes that I'm putting on top. Because what's underneath influences what's on top. And that's why we went to all the trouble to add all those layers in the last video, so that we could get to this point where we can add our light colors. And now I'm using the 276 buff. I could also use the Caran d'Ache. Whatever works for you. So I'm using the Caran d'Ache to pull out the whiskers on the chin, pull some hairs into the background as I work down the face of the wolf. It really looks nice. Now I'm going to use the 233 raw sienna to add some gold hairs on the edge that faces to the right, that's going to be backlit. So as I'm working from the outside edge that's backlit inside, I want to add some brighter color as I work towards the interior. So I decided to use the raw sienna, the same gold color we used on the ear. And now I'm going to add strokes of 276 buff as I work towards the inside edge as well. Because I want to create that backlit, standing in the moonlight appearance. So we're going to use some really exaggerated color to do that. And then I'll use the Caran d'Ache to add the fine hairs on the outside edge that we're going to pull into the background. And then as I work on the interior of the wolf, I will continue to use the Conte white pastel stick. And here I'm working on the side of the face over in the mask area. The hair is starting to get longer here as well. So I want to keep that in mind as I work in that area. I'm using my 700 Carbothello pencil to add some little hairs, pulling them out, and my white pastel pencil to add a few brighter hairs. Continuing to add white hair to the face of Wolf. We've almost got the face finished. Now you can see in this area I'm not covering every square inch of the face of the wolf. I'm putting in the little short hairs, and this area, the skin and the shadows and the hair show up where the hair starts to separate because the wolf is holding his head up. And so we want to show that. And I'm using my pencil to add a few hairs as well. Now as I get closer to the right edge, I'm adding the 233 raw sienna to make the hair in that area. We're actually adding the raw sienna in the same area where we put in our underlayer the 411.5, which was the bright red Rembrandt pastel. And now I'm adding the 276 for the brighter hair. Or you could use your pencil. I prefer the 276 because I think I'm so familiar with it, I can make just as good a strokes as if I use a pencil. And I do like new pastels. So if you haven't learned to do this technique, I urge you to do so. It just makes beautiful fur on velour paper. Now there's an area on the muzzle that's brighter white. So I'm going to use the end of my pastel stick to add the more white pigment there. I don't want any hairs there. I just want to add whiter pigment. So that's what I did right in that spot on the wolf's face. And here I'm using my charcoal pencil again to add in a few dark hairs. Join me for part 4 as we continue to work on our beautiful wolf